Greetings, ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to this review of the Tier 7 German medium tank, the VK3002D. As ever, quick little bit of historical context for you. There isn't really that much to say about this tank, as it never entered production. Basically, when the Germans called in the Second World War for a proposed medium tank development, the tank that would ultimately become the Panther, a couple of different companies put suggestions forward. The one that was accepted was from the MAN company, and that became the Panther that we all know and love. The VK3002D was a proposal, as the D suggests, from the Daimler company. It wasn't taken on board. Basically, this is a prototype for the Panther had Daimler been asked to build the Panther, and the VK3001D at Tier 6 is a prototype for the prototype. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, what do you actually get in game? Well, this is a Tier 7 medium tanks, and this is one of the older Tier 7 medium tanks, so Tier 7 medium tank syndrome applies, i.e. generally speaking the Tier 7 medium tanks are considered rather lackluster. But, let's persevere anyway. 1250 hit points is actually quite a good slab for a Tier 7. It's not as much as the 1300 that the Panther gets, but if you look at something like, oh I don't know, where's a Comet? Here, Comet, where are you? There you are. Comet is down at 1150. Most Tier 7 medium tanks tend to be around the 1000 to or 1100 mark, so 1250 is actually quite a good slab of health for a Tier 7 medium. It's basically a 40-ton machine with a 720 horsepower engine, so you're looking at actually a pretty decent horsepower to ton ratio of about 18, which is kind of uncharacteristically German. If you compare that with the Panther, for example, you're down at 15, and often people think of the German medium tanks as being relatively sluggish with a decent top speed once they get going. This thing is rather less sluggish. You still notice it's not the nimblest medium tank in the world, but it's certainly not the least agile either. It does retain the decent top speed though at 56 kilometers per hour. Hull traverse speed of 43 degrees a second is pretty decent. Of course, the caveat I always put in here, remember, the actual traverse speed that you see when you use a tank is a function of this value quoted here, the engine power, and the ground resistance values. There may be some other factors as well, I don't know. So just because in the garage it says 43 degrees per second, that does not mean you will always traverse at 43 degrees a second. Nonetheless, it's perfectly acceptable. Way better than the Panther's 32 degrees a second. And again, if we just switch back to the British, because I own it, what's the Comet on? The Comet is listed as 36. So in that sense, it is actually better, more agile than the Comet, again with those caveats in mind. Hull armour, 80mm of frontal armour, sloped at the back at a good angle. I will talk more about the armour in a bit, but the frontal hull is okay, it can bounce some lower tiers. Side armour, 45, rear armour, 50. It kind of looks a bit like a T-34 hull, and that's no coincidence. The T-34s were used very much as inspiration for the different designs that became the Panther, with the sloped armour, and the Daimler company in particular, they essentially made a German T-34. Voila. So, yeah, I mean, this is kind of a German T-34-85, if you will, the tank you're actually looking at. Turret armour, well, it's the same small-term turret that you get on the Panther here. So 120mm of frontal armour on the turret. Again, I'll talk more about this in a moment. Sloping isn't great. Side armour 60, rear armour 60. The turret isn't badly armoured. Gun, gonna talk about again in a bit. Turret traverse speed is actually quite interesting. This is one of those quirky tanks that actually gets, I'm not going to bother equipping it. It actually gets a better turret traverse speed with the stock turret compared to the fully upgraded turret. You notice that on a couple of German machines. A fully upgraded turret gets you better armour, it gets you better view range, it gets you a better gun selection and better performance with those guns, but you lose a little bit of turret traverse. So there's that to bear in mind. The Germans don't tend to have particularly fast turning turrets at the best of times. 380 meter view range is pretty decent. It's the same as the Comet, same as the Panther as well. Yeah, it's par for the course for a tier 7 medium tank, and a 710 meter signal range is perfectly good. So they are the stats as presented in the garage. Basically what you get with this thing is a medium tanker's medium tank with a German flavour. This tank really should be used as a flanker rather than some sniper. This is not a Panther. This is not a kind of medium TD hybrid. This is a pure medium tank with enough armour to bounce some shells here or there. Now, let's talk about the guns. This thing suffers from mid-tier German tanks gun syndrome. What is mid-tier German tank gun syndrome? Well, it's that the guns are often considered a bit naff. Right, there are 4 guns to use on this thing. 1, you have the stock gun. If you ever use this L48 75mm gun, you need to have your head examined because there is absolutely no reason to do so. None at all. Don't ever use this for any reason. You should already have other things unlocked. You can use the 105mm L28. This is the 105mm derp gun. Way back in the dawny mists of time, this used to be a choice to use on this tank. I remember watching a video from Quickie Baby where he did his grind with this gun on this tank, firing almost exclusively heat ammo, because he just wanted to power through the grind as quickly as possible. Since then, the gun has received a nerf, in particular to its heat ammo, so that is a less viable choice. In fact, if you were to spam heat ammo out of this thing, you'd be going around with less penetration than you get on the terrible L48, and this is at tier 7, that's not very good. Basically, this is not a good gun choice anymore. So then you're left with 2 guns. This one, and this one. This is going to be a familiar quandary to anyone who's played the Jagdpanther 4 or the VK 3601H. You have a choice between a 75 and a 50, and an 88mm gun. 75mm gun. This is the German L70 75mm gun that you get on loads of machines at the mid tiers. 15 rounds on this tank. You have 15 rounds a minute rate of fire, 150 pen, 135 alpha damage, 0.35 dispersion, 2.3 second aim time. It's a very generic 75mm gun. It's alright. In fact, the dispersion you get on it here is actually not very good. It's worse than you get on a lot of the tier 6s, which is kind of disappointing. Alternatively, you have the legendary German KWK-36 L56 88mm gun, the gun that the Tiger used, but in this game it's a bit... 9.38 rate of fire, 132 penetration, and that's really the sticking point. 220 alpha, 0.38 dispersion, 2.3 second aim time. Basically, it's the old L56 has low penetration versus a slightly uninspiring 75mm gun choice. This is basically the same gun choice you had on the Jagdpanther 4, similar gun choice to what you have on the VK3601H. Which one do you use? Well, let's have a look at these in a little bit more detail. On the tech tree, the L56, the 88mm, is kind of the quote-unquote top gun. It's the highest tiered gun. And it's a good gun in every respect except one, and that's the penetration. 132mm of penetration would be alright on a tier 6 medium tank. Here at tier 7, it's looking rather ropey. And tier 7 medium tanks as a general rule often suffer from a bit from penetration issues. They tend to get the same guns you found at tier 6, and if you use the 88mm gun on this tank, you have the lowest penetration of any tier 7 medium tank. The accuracy is not fantastic. The aim time is pretty good, and I can tell you the bloom values on the gun are actually pretty decent. But you can compensate for the low penetration a little bit by firing APCR, but even the APCR ammo on this tank only has 170 odd pen. Some of the tier 7 mediums have more pen than that on the regular AP rounds, so the APCR ammo isn't great either. The HE rounds are alright. But in order to make this gun work, if you choose to use this gun, you have to play this tank as a proper medium tank, a flanker. None of this sniping from long range rubbish. It's not going to work. The one thing to point out with it is that you get 9.38 rounds a minute with 220 alpha damage. Off the top of my head, I think that gives this tank the second highest DPM of any of the tier 7 mediums. The only tank that just nudges it out is the Comet, and the 88mm gun gets 220 alpha, where the Comet gets something like 140, 150. So you get good DPM with this gun, but of course you have to penetrate. if you look at the L70 gun, the 75mm gun, where is it better? Well, it's better rate of fire, but the lower alpha damage actually means you get worse DPM. You get better APCR penetration, or you get better penetration across the board, apart from the HE rounds. You get worse HE rounds, better dispersion, but still not breathtaking, and actually marginally better soft gun stats, but there's a caveat that I'm going to mention in a moment. But those better soft gun stats, you really don't actually notice that much. Which gun you use is going to be up to you. What I'm going to show you with gameplay is one game using each gun, and you make your own minds up, basically. Personally, and if you've watched my Jagdpanther 4 review and know my opinions on these guns, you might see what's coming. Personally, I used the L56, the 88mm gun, and just accepted the lower penetration, used the tank as a flanker, and I actually found the grind to be pretty damn painless, and I didn't have any significant problems with the tank. I actually even enjoyed it. Your mileage may vary. I honestly think the 88mm gun is the best gun to use on this tank, but if you hate this 88mm gun and everything it stands for, you're going to be using the 75mm weapon. Now, caveat time. In order to mount the 88mm, you have to use the top turret. Okay, fine. You don't have to use the top turret if you're going to use the 75mm gun. Why do I mention this? Well, it's fairly simple. If you actually look at the gun selection, yeah. The reason is that the stock turret has a slightly better traverse speed, and so if you take the 75mm gun, one option would be to stick with the stock turret and make use of the better turret traverse speed. The problem here is that using the stock turret gives you worse aiming stats on the gun, so I'm not sure it's an option that I would actually recommend, but it's an option. Basically, in my opinion, if you choose the 75mm gun for this tank, what you get is a very mediocre machine that has no redeeming feature and kind of loses out to all the other 75mm gun armed tier 7 medium tanks. If you pick the 88, you get something a little interesting at the very least. That's my opinion, that's my take. Your mileage may vary. Let's have a quick look at the grind. Go back to the German tech tree here. Now, way back in the dawning mists of time, the VK3002D was not a machine you ever saw because it was a dead end in the tech tree. Basically, before the introduction of the Leopards and the Indian Panzer and the introduction of the RU-251 or the Spa Panzer 1C or any of this rubbish, the VK3002D, I can't remember where it used to go to, but it used to be a sidestepping branch. From the VK, you couldn't unlock any tier 8, but you could unlock a couple of different tier 7s. So it was not a machine you ever saw. However, quite a while ago now, they introduced the, well, you've got the Spa Panzer 1C, the RU-251, and the Indian Panzer Leopard prototype, Leopard 1, etc. And so there is actually a line that you can get to from the VK, but there is another way of accessing the same line. You can go via the light tanks and you will still get up to there. So what's the grind on this line like then? Well, there are two different ways of accessing this line. So tier 1, you have the LOL tractor. It's a tier 1, who cares? It's actually a good tier 1, but never mind. Panzer 2 at tier 2, again, you don't spend long in it. Who really cares? That's kind of up to you. And then the line splits. You either go the Panzer 3A or the Panzer 2G. Personally, I prefer the 3A. I think it's actually quite a fun little tank, but I leave that up to you. And ditto, I prefer the Panzer 3 to the VK2001D. Panzer 3 is a bit faster, but again, that's kind of going to be your choice. It doesn't really matter which line you take. They both coalesce into the Panzer 3/4 at tier 5 anyway. If you go via the Panzer 3A, I think you get basically, if you're interested in German light tanks, if you go the Panzer 2G, you unlock both this line and the German lights. If you're interested in German heavy tanks, if you go to the Panzer 3A, you can either sidestep to the Panzer 4A and go up to the Panzer 4H and then through this way, or you can go up to the DW2, VK3001H and through this way. Either way, you get to access German heavy tanks, so kind of up to you. Panzer 3-4 at tier 5. I have a review of this tank on my channel, although it is a little bit old. I actually found it to be a really fun machine, more so than the Panzer 4. You're a bit more limited in terms of gun selection and whatnot, but I found it quite a fun machine. VK3001D at tier 6. Again, I have a review of this on my channel. It's one of... I think tier 6 medium tanks are a great bunch, and this is a good tier 6 medium tank. The only reason I didn't keep it was because I already had tier 6 medium tanks. There wasn't really much point me keeping this one as well, but it's a good tank. Then you get to the 3002D. Now this is a bit of a mixed bag. Right, initially... So essentially, a lot of these modules are used with other lines. This is why I say it's a mixed bag. Now, on the one hand, that means the grind isn't that painful. On the other hand, it means that often this tank can feel rather... What? That was an upgrade? Is that it? You know, that sort of feeling. So, engines, I cannot remember. Yeah, you can have these engines unlocked from... So, this is the second engine, VK3001D. So, you'll already have that 700 horsepower engine unlocked, so you never have to use this stock engine. And then you get the top engine with 720 horsepower. Now you could skip out on this engine, it doesn't go anywhere, and it is unique to this tank, only providing an additional 20 horsepower. But it's also a bit lighter and gets a slightly lower chance to set on fire. So it is a better engine, and I would recommend getting it, I guess. But if you really don't like this tank and you really don't want to spend the... How much XP and credits is it? 17,000 XP and 54,000 credits, then I guess you could skip out this engine. The engine is not a priority either way. In terms of radios, in case anyone cares, middle radio is shared by literally everyone and their wife. You will have this unlocked most likely. And the top radio, again, you can unlock this on a bunch of tier 4s, so you're probably going to have this unlocked. In fact, you can unlock this on the VK3001D at tier 6, so there's no reason not to have this radio already unlocked. Not that anyone gets too excited by radios. So initially, you're going to be forced to use the L70 gun because it can be mounted on the stock turret, whereas the others cannot. Then you unlock this top turret. Then, well, you'll probably already have the 105mm gun unlocked from somewhere. If you don't, it may well be worth unlocking, but don't use it on this tank, I don't think. It's just not worth it. Then you unlock the L56, then you proceed to the Indian Panzer. So I would say, leave the top engine for a while, prioritize the turret and the gun. Try out the gun, see what you think, get the suspension whenever you need to make that work. Try out the top gun, see what you think, use whichever gun turret combination you want. Then unlock the top engine, unlock any other modules you haven't unlocked, then grind out the Indian Panzer. That's my recommendation for this tank. I didn't find it a particularly painful grind, if I'm honest. And it's not one of those... I mean, it does benefit from having played tanks in other lines, but it shares a lot of modules with the Tier 6, the VK3001D, and that's because essentially they're the same tank. It's just Wargaming decided to split them into two when they put them into the game. Or rather, they put the 3002D in and then needed a Tier 6, and so kind of almost made up the 3001D, kind of. Anyway. So, it's a fairly... I found it a fairly easy grind. How easy you find unlocking the Indian Panzer is going to depend upon how much you can put up with this tank in whatever configuration you decide to choose. One thing to mention at this point, you do get quite a lot of ammo. So you can see I've got 15 rounds of APCR here. That's because this thing packs 80 rounds of ammunition. I don't need that much APCR. I can't remember when I actually used it, if I'm going to be brutally honest. But I had it because I could, because large ammo capacity. So equipment, crew skills, and consumables. I just have your standard set of consumables, nothing, you know, small first aid kit, small repair kit, manual fire extinguishers. You could use the premium versions of any of these, of course, the large, and automatic. I didn't find this thing had a particular tendency to have any crew members knocked out or suffer any particular module damage, or set on fire particularly, so swapping out for chocolate would be an option, or swapping something out for chocolate would definitely be an option open to you. In terms of equipment, nothing really to say here that's going to surprise anyone. At the moment in the game, the equipment is very much, some equipment is really good, some equipment is really bad, and so you see the same equipment used on every damn tank. What would you pick? Step 1, rammer, because if you can mount a rammer, you probably should. Increases your DPM, hurrah. Step 2, coated optics, increase your view range. You could go for binos instead, but I think all things together at about tier 7, I find the view range is sufficient to allow optics. That's just my opinion. Third equipment slot, it's kind of up to you. I would recommend improved vents just for the all-round better capabilities. Some people might prefer the gun laying drive, I guess, but it's not as if the aim time's particularly bad. So I would say vents. So my recommendation is Rammer Optics vents. You can't mount a vertical stabilizer on this thing. The only tier 7 mediums that can, of course, are the British and Americans, the Comet and the T20. So no vertical stabilizer for you, which is a little sad. The tank would really benefit from one, but there we go. That's life. Crew skills. Again, we're not actually going to be seeing anything particularly special here. I'll put my crew back in here. It's a tank that can take a few hits, prioritize repairs. So I've got preventative maintenance on my driver. Really, that's a bit of a legacy skill from back when shots to frontal transmission on German machines, and the transmission shots counted as engine shots, could set you on fire. You could probably retrain that out now. I didn't have any particular fire-related problems in this tank. Certainly not from the engine. So that's actually probably a bit surplus to requirements now. I would prioritize repairs, 6th Sense for your commander, repairs for everyone else. Safe storage is never a bad idea for your loader to get at some point, and things like smooth ride, snapshot, situational awareness and recon to improve your view range and all that jazz. So if you're going to retrain your crew for for gold when they hit their first skill, then just take complete repairs across the board, possibly. And then when you hit 100% on that, retrain for gold, get 6th Sense on the commander, maybe safe storage on the loader. Leave that up to you. If you're not retraining for gold and you're retraining for credits instead, then I think you're better off getting 6th Sense as soon as you can, rather than playing the extra few games. So then I would recommend starting off with 6th Sense, and possibly possibly safe storage if you want it, and then repairs on everyone else. That's my recommendation. Sorry, just to mention, another bit of equipment you could use if you want better repair skill and you're finding your repair skill is a bit naff, take a toolbox. Anyway, that's crew skills, equipment, consumables. Is there anything else I really need to mention about this tank before moving on? I don't think so. I think it's time we had a look at the armor profile, module locations, gameplay, etc. So just before talking about the armour of this thing, quickly mention something I forgot to mention in the garage. With the tank, you get 8 degrees gun depression, basically all the way around, apart from right over the engine deck at the rear. So 8 degrees of gun depression is not too shabby, it's pretty nice. It's not great, but it's the same as the T43 for anyone who cares, but it's certainly usable. So, armour profile on this tank, rear, sides, garbage. Let's not, be around the bush about this. Frontal armour. On the hull, we have 80mm sloped back at something like 45 degrees, giving you about 115, 120mm of effective armour. That means that it is good enough to bounce a lot of tier 5s and below, especially if you put a little bit of angling on it yourself, something like this. And you increase the overall effective thickness. So, yeah, the hull is good enough to bounce some lower tiers. Doesn't really have a lower front plate because it's such a steep angle, it'll just auto bounce. So anyone who tries to go for your lower front plate, because the lower front plate is always a weakness, is going to have a sad day. And there's also this strip here that's technically thicker at 100mm, but it's also flat as a pancake, so people can actually penetrate you there. Turret front, 120mm with kind of pathetic angling, gives you about 122 effective. If you can use that gun depression, of course, there you go, you can increase that back to a mighty 127. So, yeah, you can improve it, but it's never going to be absolutely fantastic. However, the thing to note about this turret is that the areas that are actually that thickness are relatively small. You basically have, around the gun mantle here, it's the turret front, which is this section. If the shot goes toward the gun mantle, suddenly you're getting considerably thicker armor. There's 250, 500 somewhere. 1034. Are you sure this is on a German tank and not a Soviet tank? Anyway, so the gun mantle, it's unlikely to be penetrated. If the shot veers over here, it's only 60mm thick, but it's at an auto bounce angle. So bounce, bounce, bounce. It's only this bit that they're actually going to penetrate. So there is that. You do have a commander's hatch to worry about, of course. Here, yeah, penetrating it is a thing that can happen, but again, if you're using your gun depression, you can minimize the shots people have on it. And if you're using all of it, you can basically mean they have no shot on it. So what I'm saying is at tier 7 the turret's pretty good. For a tier 7 medium tank, all things considered. You will still get penetrated from time to time, don't be massively surprised, especially if you're bottom tier. But the turret front is still fairly decent. Anyway, let's move on to module locations. I don't want to spend too long on this because, as I mentioned in the garage, I didn't have any particular problems with modules on this tank. But I'll still quickly talk about a couple. Driver is behind the driver's hatch, no surprise to anyone there. If we look at the side of the tank, you have an ammo rack here in the hull below the turret. Of course, fuel tanks and engine in the rear, and you've got crew members sitting in the turret there. Again, engine and fuel tank in the rear. The ammo rack in the turret is mounted at the rear on the right hand side, so be careful of shots here. Again, you can see a view from the side, and you can see that hull ammo rack extends through to the other side of the tank. So side shots can ammo rack you, and turret shots it's less likely to, because this is not a particularly common place for people to put shots, but side shots into the hull can indeed ammo rack you. That's about the only thing there really is to say about this tank. Side shots might ammo rack you, but apart from that, the module locations really aren't much of an issue. So let's just move on to some gameplay. Okay, here we go with the first game. As I mentioned in the garage, we're going to have two games here. One is going to be using the 75mm gun, one is going to be using the 88. Incidentally, it's also one replay where I'm top tier and one where I'm bottom tier, which is what I usually do anyway, but that was by accident rather than design. So, first replay here. Using the 75mm gun. Now I mentioned you can use the stock turret with this thing as it gives you better turret traverse speed. I'm not doing that, I'm still using the top turret. So all I'm doing is switching out the guns between these two games. Well, that's a lie. I'm switching out the guns between these two games, but also this first game I think I'm using a grindy equipment set, and the second game I think I might have the gun rammer, the equipment set I recommended, basically gun rammer, optics and vents. But this first game is going to be toolbox, binos and camo net, so bear that in mind. But all the same, we're here on Corellia, this is an assault game and we're on the defending team, and first shot of the game, 1 HP off of the M7, hurrah, we secure ourselves a kill. Now playing this a little bit passively, I guess. This position, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You have that rock to try and shield yourself from tank destroyers up on the kind of hill there. The problem being, of course, that the rock isn't huge and sometimes it doesn't provide quite enough protection. So there we go. That's life. I'm not rushing forward. Basically, I was trying to test out, as I say, this 75mm gun, and I was aware that the 75mm gun should be better at range, so I'm trying to use it at range. Looking for shots, of which I don't appear to have any, which is kind of annoying. Oh, Stug. And that one bounced. Yay. Like I said, this gun is better at range, but that doesn't mean this is actually a particularly good gun to use at range. If you want to shoot something a long way away in your medium tanks, pick up a Panther. Same caliber gun, more penetration, better accuracy. But nonetheless. And people often use these German medium tanks like snipers because that's how they're often advertised. But the VK3002D, not so much really falling into that category. Chinukai there, can I pick up a shot on him? Yes, I can. He's not as well hidden as he thought he was, and he's actually just driving out, giving me a better shot into him. That one misses, however. As I mentioned, the accuracy on this gun is better than on the 88, but not spectacular, and that shot actually bounced. Working over the Jagdpanzer IV now. Actually track him there on the hill, which is kind of amusing. And we're just pumping shot after shot into this guy. But you can see the damage rolls, you know, 118. This is a 75mm gun with 135 average damage. You're gonna get low damage rolls. No, I was just ploughing shots into this guy's last known location in the hopes of picking up a kill. I don't think I do. So I should probably shoot someone else. Oh, as it is, that guy is spotted, but I don't have the penetration to challenge the side of his turret. Side of his hull, however, maybe. Ah, he hit the side of his turret, go figure. Have a blind punt. There we go. Burning through the ammunition, but I have a lot of ammunition to burn through, so I'm not going to worry about that too much. Medium tank has been spotted. And just seeing if I can line up a shot on this guy. Looks like a Cheeto. There he is. And he's behind a rock. Boo! Damn you, Cheeto! Why you no let me shoot you? C'est la vie. He's probably going to have that light tank, frankly. One-on-one frontal engagement? Yeah, light tank's not really made for that. And indeed, T14 actually gets the T21. Wait, there's a T14 in this game? He's platooned up with a tier 4 light tank. Oh dear. Right. Stug. See what we can do to this guy. You can see it took a while to aim, even though this gun technically has marginally better aiming stats. But we're able to pick up kill number 2 on that fellow. Another medium tank has been spotted. But it looks like he's behind a rock. And there's the T14 in question. Now he's really going to struggle to penetrate me without APCR, and even with APCR he's going to have a hard time. But as it is, he just gets deleted from the map, and indeed the game. Cheeto... Nah, no dice. That's a bit sad. Take a shot there in the side. I was clearly over-angling myself. I mean, he has 150 pen, which is in the range where he can very definitely penetrate me. And I take another penetration there. But we have a pair of T29s going over to do something about him. I bounce that shot, and I'm just going to let the T29s do their thing to him. I'm sure it'll be messy. And I'm going to go and see if I can do something about this tank destroyer. T21, the enemy T21 that is, dies for his troubles. No, I'm actually deciding to go around this way toward the Cheeto, who is now dead. Chinukai away in the distance. This is a 600-meter shot, and he's behind a rock. Oh, but I don't want to hit an ally, and it misses. Like I said, 600-meter shot. There we go. One more hit to finish this guy off, I think. Nah, that was nowhere near enough lead on that one. There we go. And now we're just going to move forward and deal with anyone who's left, really. There's only the 3 of them. Found their Oni. He's still all the way at the back there. I've no idea what he was doing up on that hill. In that tank, you really need to, in this matchmaking, be going forward and beating people to death in the face. But apparently that wasn't what he was doing. Go figure. Oh, players in World of Tanks, aren't you so silly? Moving forward here, along with our T29 buddies, I've got the health to take some hits if necessary, so I just want to find that Chinukai, who is a one-shot, and the AMX AC-46. No idea how much health he is on. Found the AMX AC-46, but alas, he's far enough away that I'm never going to get a penetrating shot on him in a month of Sundays. Sorry, I just took a quick sip of a drink there because my voice is a little bit AC-46 actually nails our VK3601H, which means the enemy team have effectively won the other side of the map. Gonna speed this along a little bit until we get back into the action. Doobie-doo, knocked over a tree. I cannot remember how much more action I see before the end of the game, if I'm going to be honest. Hopefully I'm going to come across that Chinukai and I'm going to execute him. But time will tell. He's over there. Oni takes out our T-34. There's their TD. I'm coming up onto the hill to give my allies supporting fire. And there we go, we've found the bad guys, and I actually get spotted for my troubles, which is a little suboptimal, if we're going to be honest. Chinukai is dead. I get tracked into the bargain, which is slightly unfortunate, and the tank destroyer is looking at me, and I bounce on him. His armor is not fantastic, but this is a long-range shot, so go figure. Get a bit lucky that that shot hits and penetrates, going for the weak spots on top of his tank, but still bouncing. And he is done. That just leaves the Oni. And there he is. And honestly, I need flanking shots into this guy. Bum shots are not sufficient to do the job. It's just not going to work. I need his flank, and he's not giving it to me. But in the end, I managed to take him out by putting an APCR round, and yes, with an Oni, it takes an APCR round into his bum, and that was the game. So let's go and have a look at the results. So that ended up being enough for second class mastery, spotter, fighter, fire for effect, and bruiser. 1,480 damage done, 4 kills, 945 base experience, put me second on the team. 37 shots fired, only 26 hits. Bear in mind a lot of those shots were blind, of which only 14 penetrated, and we were top tier. And that's really the thing. If you want to use the 75mm gun, you're making the tank a little bit more into a sniper, but it's not a sniper, if that makes any sort of sense. Most of the damage I did was from extreme range. We received 4 hits, of which we bounced 1 for 130 damage blocked by our armour, and picked up 1100 assistance damage into the bargain on that Oni, actually. I was doing the spotting on him at the end, which is nice. With a premium account, we made a 24,500 credit profit. Without a premium account, that would have been a 14,000 credit profit, and came away with a reasonable amount of XP as well. So, there's a game with a 75mm gun. I don't tend to pick particularly spectacular games for these reviews. It's just to give you an idea of how the tank kind of behaves. So let's move on to the next game, where we are using the 88mm gun. Okay, here we go with the second replay. As I mentioned, this is going to be using the short 88mm gun. And as I also mentioned, incidentally, this is also a tier 9 game. Now, this is not intentional. It's just the game I had that I thought was worth. That was informative to show happened to be when I was bottom tier, so kind of worked out nicely in that sense. We are here on Erlenberg. Couldn't remember the name of the map. It's is this a standard game? It's a standard game. I don't play that many standard battles on Erlenberg. Usually it's assault, sometimes encounter, but anyway, it's a standard game. So initially I am going down the 1 and 2 lines here, trying to see if I can get some early spotting. I'm using optics in this game, so I've got some view range to work with, trying to see if I can see the bad guys. Now, it's kind of interesting that the game I ended up showing you is a tier 9 game with a gun that has such low penetration. And no, I'm not just going to spam APCR everywhere. Not actually that it would have made really any difference, if I remember correctly. This is a patch 9.12 game as well, if anybody's interested. So, Panther 2 has been spotted. We're going to see more of that guy later on. T29 spotted, but I don't really have a good shot on him, and I was more interested in potentially getting shots on this T54 Mod 1, which I don't have, and the T43, which I don't have. So, all things considered, not a great start for us in the VK here. Scoreline is currently even. No one has yet succumbed to the inevitable and dropped dead. Still trying to see if I can spot anyone. I've got a 6th sense, so I'll know if I've been spotted. Although obviously I'll know 3 seconds after I've been spotted, but you know. That's just the way it is. And come on guys, come on. Where are ya? No. No. Oh, Tiger 2. No. Ah, Rheinmetall Borsig. Someone I can definitely penetrate. And there we go. 202 is actually a low damage roll. When you say that's a low damage roll from a tier 7 medium tank, that's not too shabby. Have another punt. It looks like the shot has probably connected, so that'll be another 200 and something damage into him, most likely. Conqueror. Nah, he's looking at me. That's never going to pen. AMX CDC and a Panther 2, however, are rather softer targets. So maybe I can do something to those guys. There we go, CDC. And I actually completely whiffed that shot. No idea where that shot went, but, you know, 0.38 dispersion is not fantastic. So you have, if you're going to take some long-range shots, you have to expect the odd shot to go goodness only knows where. I apparently don't bother having a shot at that Panther 2. I think I'm paranoid about getting spotted here, because I really don't want to start eating, like, Borsig shells to the face. That would be rather suboptimal. And, oh, I get spotted anyway, so back off. Let's not outstay my welcome. And actually our tanks here are getting a little beaten up. This is perhaps not optimal, and I eat a shell in the face from a T-54 Mod 1. Getting shot is the game's way of telling you to be somewhere else. So with that in mind, I'm going to slightly relocate. Scoreline is currently 3-4. I've put in 1 or 2 shots here, nothing particularly spectacular. But again, bear in mind this is a tier 9 game, so yeah. You can't necessarily expect spectacular from your tier 7 medium tanks. Panther 2 is over there. Panther 2 doesn't have particularly good armour, but he's behind a rock now or something. KV4 is it's not even worth bothering with unless he's giving me his backside. I might be able to do something to him with APCR ammo, but in the end my allies managed to take him down, so there is that. Panther 2 once again has been spotted. Do I take the shot this time before he gets behind the rock? No, I don't, because I haven't taken a hint yet. T-29 gets taken out, and there's the AMX CDC behind a bit of brickwork. Now, there's still the Conqueror and the Tiger II over here, and do still, of course, have fire support from the backline. There's a T-28 prototype back there, among other things. Again, not taking a shot on that Panther II, but there's a T-43, Soviet Tier 7 counterpart. Shot doesn't even hit the target. Again, this gun is not for sniping, but I'm playing this cautiously because if I just drive forward, I'm going to eat a whole world of pain and I'm going to die. Instead, I'm trying to pick off the squishier targets, and oh Christ, ooh. Tiger II only blows my track off, and I know there's a Borsig back there, or there was a Borsig back there, and I know there's some big guns back there, so I don't hang around to see how that's going to turn out. Now, Tiger II has popped up behind our Tiger II and our Conqueror, so it's at this stage when I can make myself useful. Shots into the rear of a Tiger II. He's actually been reduced to a one-shot. I low roll, leaving him on 10 health, but the reload on this gun is fairly good, but it's not necessary as someone else finishes him off. Nonetheless, was trying to protect the rear or flank of my Conqueror and Tiger II there. Semi-successful. Eventually they died, which is unfortunate, but we did manage to put some damage into that Tiger II. Tier 9 game again, so this is a very cagey game. Haven't been spotted. There's the spot on the T-43. He's probably got sixth sense because he's just slowed down, so I imagine he's realised someone has spotted him. T-54 Mod 1. Ditto applies. I'm not taking these shots. I'm hopefully just letting my allies do the shooting. I mean, we've got a Panther and a T-28 prototype back there, as well as artillery hanging around by the base. They have far punchier guns than I do. CDC, and I missed the shot. There's quite a lot of missed shots in this game. I'd forgotten how many shots got missed in the course of this game. But the reason for me showing this game in particular hasn't cropped up yet, so we'll get to that a little bit later. CDC has been reduced to fairly low health, and basically the enemy medium tanks are using this opportunity to push. So I am sweeping around to catch these guys in the backside. CDC, one shot in, leave the guy a one shot, and yeah, talk about unnecessary ammo racks. Artillery ammo racks him for about 160 health, so whatever. I have shots on the side of that T-54, take it, another low roll, getting a lot of low rolls in this game. But, oh, and I almost take a shot in the rear, but he's distracted by someone else. There's another shot, 217 again, fractionally low. No, he's looking at me. Nah, it's not going to work. Hopefully T-28 prototype can finish him off, or something similar. He turns to face someone that isn't me. Bounce on him. Yeah, his side was at a respectable angle. Can't really hurt him anymore, but the T-43 I can. Panther takes out the T-54 Mod 1, and that just leaves this T-43 feeling somewhat sorry for himself and dead. Panther 2, however, has come up behind me, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to show this replay. He puts a shot into my track, leaving me on very low health. I put one into his lower plate. He fires at the same time. Now, this little engagement I couldn't have done with the 75mm gun. I have enough penetration to go through the Panther 2's lower plate. We each put a shot into each other at the same time. We are now each a one shot for the other. Despite the fact that the Panther 2 is a tier higher, and is a tier 8 medium tank with respectable DPM, I will reload before he does and execute him, leaving myself on 35 health. And that ends up being the game. So, in that situation, if I'd been using the 75mm gun, the lower alpha damage, remembering of course that most damage in this game is front-loaded, by which I mean you might have terrible DPM, but if you've got high alpha damage, you know, if your gun is already loaded when an engagement starts, you can get that large alpha damage off right at the beginning. And so you can do damage, you can do burst damage for a short period of time, far in excess of your DPM, if you have the alpha damage to do so. Anyway, I wouldn't have been able to survive that engagement with the 75. The Panther II would just have killed me. And as it is, that didn't look like a particularly spectacular game, but we'll see come the end how we actually managed to do. So that game actually ended up being enough for First Class Mastery, Fire for Effect, and Spotter ribbons, which surprised me at the time, but, you know, shooting higher tier targets, I guess, will do that for you. We actually finished at the top of our team with 1,717 damage done, 1 kill, and 1,027 base experience. And if we'd been using the 75mm gun, I don't think that game would have gone quite as well, if I'm honest. Now, I haven't really shown you any games where we got into some hard brawling action, really, with this tank. If you want to see something like that, I do actually have a video showing my Ace Tanker game for the VK, so go and check that out. If I remember, I'll put a link in the video description. 16 shots fired, 12 hits, 9 penetrations for that damage count, most of which was from relatively close range. Received 7 hits, of which 2 did not penetrate, although they weren't blocked by our armour, they were just track shots. Spotted 1 enemy tank, damaged 6, killed 1, got 1400 assistance damage into the bargain, and made a respectable profit at the same time. Times the XP event on for the time, so there we go, we got a nice bit of XP to go along with. So hopefully that's given you an idea of some of the sorts of ways in which the VK tends to play out. Let's go and jump back into the garage. So what do I think overall about this tank? I actually had fun playing it. Let's just have a quick look at my stats. I got through this tank in 64 games, 67% wins, 811 base experience. I think I had a premium account for at least some of this time, do bear in mind. So that will reduce the number of games played and increase the amount of XP per game. So don't worry too much about those figures. The more important, 67% win rate, although small sample size and all that. Decent damage ratios and all that jazz. I got 1 mark of excellence. I was working towards my second, but I never quite got the second mark. And I think my WN8 for the tank was, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was over 2,000. So I did alright in the machine. I kind of had fun in it, but I wouldn't play it in preference to the other tier 7s that I already own. So I will not be keeping this machine. But it's not as bad as a lot of people would have you believe. I didn't find. It's probably going to come down to how much you like the 88mm gun, to be honest. If you like the 88, or if you can put up with the 88, this might be a fun tank. It becomes a decent platform with a decent in some ways and less decent in others gun. If you can't stand the 88, you're going to be stuck with the L70 75mm gun, and that might be quite a painful experience. Or not painful, but suboptimal experience, let's put it that way. I mean, if I want to play a German tank at tier 7, I'll pick the Panther. Basically, the problem with the German tech tree, so I'm going to use this as a little bit of a rant about the German tech tree. Problem with the German tech tree is that they have a penetration gap. If you look at the guns, so most tech trees, you tend to find tier 6 has about 150 penetration. This is for medium tanks. Less below that and more above that, obviously. By the time you get up to tier 8 and tier 9, you tend to be hitting 200 plus penetration. And so that means tier 7 really wants a sort of mid penetration, somewhere between 150 and 200. The problem is, the Germans don't really have a gun that fits the bill. Off the top of my head, the only German gun that actually has a penetration somewhere in that range is the 90mm gun you get on the RU-251 that gets 190, actually, is pen. But this is a post-war gun on a post-war tank. You can't just slap that onto a tier 7 medium tank. But it means that there's this penetration gap in the German tech tree that means that there are a number of machines that have this gun combination, the L70 75mm and the L56 88mm, and they feel a bit lackluster because of that penetration gap. If I were wargaming, the easiest way to solve this would be, in my opinion, to bump the L56's penetration with AP up to around the 170 mark, something like that, and give its APCR penetration around 200. That seems to kind of sort that problem out, if I'm going to be honest. Because then you have a gun with the penetration penetration in that range. Then, if you look at all the machines that suffer from this problem, Jagdpanther 4, Jagdpanzer 4, that would bring its penetration up to 170-ish, which would bring it into line with the other Tier 6 tank destroyers. The Americans, apart from that, are the lowest at 160. Then you got the Brits at 170, the Soviets at 175, etc., etc. The VK3601H at Tier 6, it could then use the 88mm gun with 170 pen, which brings it in line with the other 85 and 90 and 100mm guns at the same tier. Well, not 85, sorry. So like the KV85 has about 175 pen, the M6 160, you know, it brings it into that ballpark. If you did the same to this tank, it would bring the penetration up to about the same as the American, the T20 or the Chinese T34-1 or something like that. And I think you could do that without this tank being especially overpowered. Maybe you'd want to tweak a couple of parameters, but honestly, it's just overall, I think the putting the historical, because there is a bit of a debate about what penetration some of these German tanks should have, and whether it has been incorrectly implemented in the game. I don't know, gonna leave that aside for now, but in terms of talking about this purely from a game perspective, I think they really should buff the penetration on this 88mm gun. It would bridge this penetration gap in the German tech tree, and it would bridge it for machines that were of the war period, not post-war machines. And so I think that would be a bit of an improvement all round, shall we say. And also tanks like the Japanese heavy tank number 6. It would give that usable penetration, people would stop whinging, and so on and so forth. I don't think any of these tanks are going to become particularly overpowered by doing this, but I think that's a problem the Germans have, and that could be addressed. Having said that, I don't think this is a particularly terrible machine, but as I mentioned, I'm not keeping it. I would rather play one of my other Tier 7 medium tanks. Anyway, there we go. I hope you guys found that review vaguely informative or enjoyed it. If you did, by all means, feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.